I stayed by Julian's side for a full year, only to realize I was nothing more than a stand-in for the person he truly loved. When the one he held dear finally returned home, Julian cast me out without hesitation. Looking down at me, he said coldly, "Now that I think about it, the only thing you have in common is that you're both men. You don't even deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as him." The illusion shattered. I stepped away with a bitter smile, quietly removing myself from the story. That day, in the bitter cold and falling snow, someone found me and brought me back to safety. Only later did I learn the truth. He was Julian's untouchable first love, the one no one could ever replace. At that moment, he held me close, his presence steady and gentle, as if I were something precious he refused to let go. "Noah," he said softly, "could you choose me, and only me?" Julian had been acting strange lately, always distracted and absent-minded. He forgot important documents at home more than once, and I was the one who had to bring them to his office. I assumed he was simply exhausted. I reminded him to rest more, telling him his health mattered most. He didn't respond. He just looked at me with those dark eyes, a trace of irritation flickering beneath the surface. I knew his temper had never been good, so over the past year, I took care of every detail of his daily life with patience and care. I tried my best to be considerate and unobtrusive, doing everything quietly, all so he could live more comfortably. That evening, he told me he had a gathering and asked me to come along. It sounded like a night out with his friends. I was surprised, but I agreed almost immediately. We had been living together for a year, yet he had never introduced me to anyone in his circle. For a brief moment, I wondered, did this mean he cared about me more than before? Later, I realized how wrong I was. He only wanted to crush my illusion completely. The gathering was at a bar. There were many people, men and women, laughing, drinking, talking over one another. The noise never seemed to stop. I frowned instinctively. I disliked places like this, but I said nothing and sat quietly beside Julian. Under the shifting lights, he had one arm casually around me. Someone laughed and asked what our relationship was. Julian didn't answer. He raised an eyebrow and turned to me instead. "What do you think?" he asked. The alcohol made my head feel light. Holding my glass, I looked at him, my face warming despite myself. "We're together," I said. The room burst into laughter. "Seriously? He actually believes that? Julian didn't tell him the real one is coming back, just a stand-in, and he thinks he belongs here. Doesn't he know his place?" Their words echoed in my head. "Stand-in?" Julian finally spoke. "With all due respect," he said lightly, a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. "Calling him a replacement is generous. He's just something to pass the time." Then he withdrew his arm. He didn't even look at me again. I felt frozen, as if plunged into ice. Was this some kind of cruel joke? My thoughts moved slowly, dulled by alcohol. I stared at him, trying to find even a trace of hesitation on his face. Someone nearby spoke in a careless tone, offering empty consolation. I stood up immediately, stepping back, my stomach turning. I looked only at Julian. "What does this mean?" I asked quietly. He remained seated, his expression flat. "Noah," he said, "this ends here. You're smart enough. Don't make me repeat myself." The lights blurred. The world seemed to tilt. I don't remember how I left or how I made it back. The villa was silent and empty. A year ago, I moved here because he told me to. I believed this place was our home. On a street covered in fallen leaves, he had approached me first, smiling gently. "May I get to know you?" Care, attention, thoughtful concern. He appeared beside me like a perfect admirer. And eventually, I fell. When he asked, "Should we be together?" I said yes without hesitation. Now, looking back, the signs had always been there. He chose my clothes for me. Almost everything I wore came from him. He always took me to a restaurant I didn't even like. When I bought small decorations on impulse, he told me to get rid of them. I thought it was just his preference. I was wrong. They were someone else's. I was only a substitute. I took a deep breath, my chest filled with cold clarity. Julian didn't come back that night. I stayed curled up on the couch until exhaustion took me. When I woke up, my body ached, my throat dry. He still wasn't home. I washed up, made a simple breakfast, and ate alone while thinking everything through. He had said it was over. Julian never said things he didn't mean. From what his friends implied, the reason was obvious. The person he truly loved was coming back. I was no longer needed. I didn't object to ending things. In fact, the thought of staying made me feel sick. But I deserved answers. Before leaving, I needed to talk to him. I sent a message. "Let's talk. I'll be at the villa." He replied hours later with a single word. "Okay." I waited 3 days. When he finally returned, it was evening. He looked relaxed, even pleased. Seeing me, he raised an eyebrow. "You're still here?" I went straight to the point. When you approached me, was it because I reminded you of someone else? Does it matter? He said dismissively. Haven't I given you enough? I thought we were in a real relationship, I said calmly. Didn't you call me something to pass the time? If you say so, he replied. I don't remember. He sat down, indifferent. I laughed quietly. Keeping up the act for a year must have been exhausting. His expression finally darkened. Noah, don't push your luck. Yes. I noticed you because you resembled Adrian. Otherwise, why would I bother? Now that I look again, you're nothing alike. He's confident and radiant. You're ordinary, forgettable. He's better than you in every way. You don't even deserve to be compared to him. The warmth I once knew was completely gone. I stood there in silence. How had I not seen this sooner? This was the man I devoted myself to for a year. I smiled coldly. Julian, you're disgusting. His face darkened. Get out of my house. It was winter. Snow fell heavily outside. He showed no mercy. That was fine. I couldn't stand this place anymore anyway. I went upstairs to pack. Most of what I owned had been bought by him. What I once saw as care now felt unbearable. They were never meant for me. They belonged to someone else. I only took the things I bought myself. After living there for a year, everything I owned fit into a single suitcase. At that moment, I felt oddly relieved. All the money Julian had given me, I never spent a cent of it. It was still sitting untouched in my bank account. I had a job. I was never someone he kept around and supported. I was simply the kind of person who preferred staying home. I worked as a freelance concept artist, took commissions from time to time, and earned enough to live comfortably on my own. When I went downstairs, Julian was still sitting on the couch, his face dark. I had no idea what he was angry about. I walked over and placed the card on the table. Your money, I said calmly. I didn't use any of it. The password is still the same. He didn't respond. Not until I dragged my suitcase to the entrance did he speak again, his voice low and sharp. Think it through. From now on, you won't get anything from me. I don't need it, I replied. Consider that you're a complete waste. As if I'd ever want something that came from him. I rolled my eyes, never turning back, and walked out of the villa. It was freezing. The place we lived in was a private residential area. To get a ride, I had to walk quite a distance. The street was empty. Cold wind mixed with sleet whipped against my face. The chill seeped straight into my bones. I couldn't stop trembling. I pulled out my phone from my coat pocket and checked the time, almost 10. In weather like this, I wasn't even sure I could get a ride. The cold I caught after sleeping on the couch a few days ago hadn't fully gone away. My head throbbed, my steps growing heavier with each one. The dizziness worsened. I crouched down, trying to steady myself. Then, suddenly, a beam of light shone over. A luxury car pulled up nearby. I shifted back slightly, making sure I wasn't blocking the road. To my surprise, the car stopped. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a black coat that made his figure look long and lean. He walked toward me slowly. I lifted my eyes weakly and caught a glimpse of his sharp, striking features. Then I heard him say, "Are you trying to pass as a snowman?" "Sorry," I said. "Am I in your way?" I stood up slowly. The dizziness hit again. Once I steadied myself, I realized he was about half a head taller than me. "That's not it," he said, brows slightly furrowed. I just wanted to confirm whether this was some kind of incident scene. I froze. What kind of person talked like that? A gust of wind swept past. I shivered and shook my head. "I'm fine. I'll get going." I turned to leave. Behind me, his voice sounded again, calm and deep. "You don't look fine. If you need help." He hadn't finished speaking when the world tilted. My body swayed, and I nearly collapsed. A strong hand caught my arm, pulling me back before I could fall. I stumbled into a firm, steady presence. He supported me quickly, keeping me upright until I regained my balance. Our eyes met. Up close, his face was almost unreal, cold, refined, and striking. A moment later, I realized what had happened and said quickly, "Thank you. At this rate, you won't make it 10 steps, he said evenly. "Hospital? I can drive you." He stepped back, giving me space. Cold and dizzy, I thought for 2 seconds and nodded. "Could you take me to a nearby hotel instead?" "Thank you. I'll pay you." He raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like a chauffeur?" Despite that, he stepped aside and gestured toward the car. I followed him, but the bag I was holding slipped from my hand, spilling my sketches onto the ground. "Wait, just a second." I called out to him. He turned back, lowered his gaze, and froze slightly when he saw the scattered drawings. I was confused. I wasn't a master-level artist, but my work wasn't that bad either. Was he really that shocked? Amused by my own thought, I crouched down to gather them. "Did you draw these?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. He crouched down as well and helped me pick them up. I glanced at him and didn't refuse. He spoke strangely, but he seemed genuinely kind. When we stood up, he looked at me again. His expression was still composed, but there was something new in his eyes. Something like tension. He cleared his throat. Well, he said awkwardly. Would you like to come to my place instead? It's nearby. Very close. I stared at him, confused. Why did he suddenly sound so polite? I was too stunned by the sudden change to respond. Let's get in the car first, he said. Before I could say anything, he guided me to the passenger seat and placed my suitcase in the trunk. The car was warm. As my body relaxed, drowsiness crept in. Before I knew it, I was brought back to his place. Judging by the house and the car, he was clearly wealthy. That ruled out any concern about him wanting money. Still, inviting a stranger home on first meeting, he really was bold. I followed behind him as he carried my suitcase inside. Thanks, I can take it from here, I said. No need, he replied firmly. You should sit. His tone left no room for argument. I sat on the couch, quietly observing the space. The interior shared the same cool tones as the villa I left. Minimalist, refined, expensive. Do you have a cold? He asked. Yes, I answered instinctively. 2 minutes later, he returned with warm water and medicine. Take this. I really didn't feel well, so I accepted without hesitation. Thank you, I said, looking up at him. May I ask your name? Arthur. I smiled politely. I'm Noah. He looked at me, his dark eyes deep and unreadable. After a few seconds, he asked carefully, Are you, MT? My eyes widened slightly. MT was the ID I used across all my social platforms. As an artist, I shared my work online and had built a following over the years. Had he recognized me from my sketches? After a brief pause, I asked, You know me? The man's naturally sharp features seemed to soften a little in that moment. He gave a low, affirmative hum in response. Soon, a hint of confusion crossed his face. It's freezing out there. Why were you wandering around so late at night with a suitcase? There was even a trace of reproach in his tone. What if something bad had happened? The question made me think of Julian again. My gaze dropped instinctively, fingers tightening around the warm cup in my hands. My roommate kicked me out. What roommate? Arthur's voice cooled instantly. That guy's an idiot. I curled my lips into a faint smile. He wasn't wrong. Thank you for tonight. I'll try not to bother you any longer. I'll leave tomorrow. He responded with a vague, non-committal hum. I slept incredibly well in Arthur's house. When I woke up the next day, it was already 10 in the morning. I hurriedly got ready and rushed downstairs. Arthur was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through his phone. Seeing me rush down in a panic, he glanced past me and raised an eyebrow. What are you running for? Is something chasing you? Not really, I said, a little embarrassed as I pressed my lips together. Sorry, I overslept. Realization dawned on his face. Running late for work? No, I'm a freelancer. I sighed silently. Somehow, every conversation with him felt like we were slightly out of sync. Come eat breakfast. So the two of us finished breakfast together in a quiet but comfortable silence. Staying this long in the home of someone I'd known for less than a day made me feel a bit awkward. After asking for his contact information, I thanked him again and explained that I needed to go find a place to rent. He added me quickly, then looked at me and asked casually, Would you be interested in a roommate with a regular schedule, a mild personality, easy to get along with, good communication skills, 187 centimeters tall, reasonably fit, and kind of handsome? His expression remained perfectly serious. It's not a big deal. Mainly, his place is cheap and comfortable. The roommate you're talking about is me. And just like that, without much effort, I found a place to live. Just as he said, the apartment was spacious, well-kept, and affordable. I could choose any empty room I wanted. No matter how I looked at it, I was the one getting a great deal. I hesitated briefly, mostly because it was in the same neighborhood where Julian lived. But when Arthur calmly said, I own several properties, if this one doesn't work, we can pick another, I thought about it for a few seconds. Then I changed my mind. I was a full-on homebody anyway. I rarely went out. Julian was always busy. When I lived in that villa before, he left early and came back late every day. Who knew if he'd even keep living there? The chances of running into him were slim. And even if I did, I wasn't the one with a moral problem. So the decision was made easily. I rented Arthur's place at a very favorable price and officially became his roommate. After a few days, I had mostly settled in. My landlord, and roommate, was genuinely kind and considerate. Every morning before leaving for work, he always left breakfast for me. I learned that he was the CEO of a company focused on game development. He worked a regular 9-to-5 schedule, and his routine was surprisingly steady. We ended up having dinner together almost every night. Sometimes he cooked, sometimes I did. Other times, we ordered takeout. I had a sneaking suspicion that he might be a fan of mine. After all, he had mentioned recognizing my social media account, and the rent discount was generous. Maybe he was just too reserved to admit it. I didn't press the issue. That day, I opened the fridge to figure out what to eat and realized we were almost out of groceries. I immediately messaged Arthur. "Arthur, we're out of food at home." "Really?" he replied. "What do you feel like eating?" "I'll stop by the store after work." After thinking for a while and failing to decide, my indecisiveness striking again, I chose a different approach. "I'll go with you." "Which mall is close to your office?" "I'll meet you after you get off work." We agreed just like that. Unexpectedly, Arthur came home early. I was curled up on the living room sofa watching TV when the door opened, letting in a wave of cold air. When he saw me, his eyes seemed to soften, and he gave me a small smile. Surprised, I asked, "Why are you back so early?" "Just changing clothes," he said calmly. "We'll head out together later." Having stayed indoors all day recently, I underestimated the temperature outside. When I tried to leave in just a coat, Arthur firmly sent me back to my room to change into a down jacket and wrap a scarf around my neck. By the time we were ready, nearly an hour had passed. We drove to the mall in Arthur's luxury car. The members-only supermarket was spacious and fully stocked. Pushing a small cart, we wandered leisurely through the aisles, picking out groceries. People kept glancing our way. I wasn't sure if it was because I looked that good. I turned to look at Arthur beside me. "Alright, fine." It was probably him. "By the way, Arthur," I asked, "do you have any foods you avoid?" He thought for a couple of seconds. "Not really. Except you don't eat cilantro, onions, ginger, root vegetables, organ meats, or skin." Halfway through, he stopped and looked at me. I gave him a look that clearly said, "You call this not really?" Seeming to realize the contradiction, he cleared his throat and tried to recover. "I'm actually pretty easy to take care of." Why was he telling me that? Was he hinting that I'd be cooking for him in the future? Considering how thoughtful he'd been, and how tired he must be after work every day, making dinner for him didn't seem unreasonable. I didn't say anything more. Each of us lost in our own thoughts, we continued walking side by side. After buying the groceries, I stood by the roadside, waiting for Arthur to bring the car around. Suddenly, someone called out from behind me, "Noah!" I turned around and saw a man approaching from a short distance away. His clothes were flashy and overly bright, his figure bulky, his face shiny with grease, dark circles hanging heavily under his eyes. When he saw me turn back, a leering smile spread across his face. "So it really is you. You left in such a hurry last time, I forgot to get your contact info." I frowned, searching my memory, and vaguely recalled him. He was one of the people who had mocked me at the bar when I was with Julian. I didn't respond, but he kept talking anyway. "Life hasn't been as good since you left Julian, huh?" He sneered. "How about coming with me instead? I'll treat you well." The way he looked at me made my skin crawl. I stepped back several paces in disgust. "Don't talk to me. You're making me sick." Even from a distance, he carried an unpleasant odor. "Don't play innocent." His expression darkened, voice turning aggressive. "You know exactly what kind of person you are. Don't be ungrateful." As he moved toward me, I hadn't even had time to react when a sudden force swept past my side. The man stumbled backward and fell hard onto the snowy ground. "Are you asking for trouble?" I turned my head and saw Arthur standing beside me, his expression icy cold. His voice was even colder. "Don't you have any self-awareness? Who do you think you are, bothering someone like this? You dare touch me? Do you know who I am?" The man shouted as he struggled to get up. The snow made the ground slippery. As he looked up and caught sight of Arthur's face, he froze, and then slipped again. His face drained of color. "Mr. Arthur, oh, you recognize me?" Arthur gave a short, humorless laugh. "Then you should know better." I was still impressed by how effortlessly Arthur had shut him down when he turned to me. "Are you alright?" I snapped back to my senses and shook my head. Arthur reached up and adjusted the scarf around my neck, his earlier coldness disappearing instantly. "Let's go home." "Okay." Inside the car, light snow began falling again outside the window. I turned to watch it drift down when Arthur suddenly called my name. "Noah." I looked back. "Yeah." His expression was serious, his tone calm but firm. "When you're out alone, you need to protect yourself. That's just how it is." Then, almost casually, he added, "Good-looking people tend to attract trouble. If something like that happens again," he said, "contact me right away." I felt slightly underestimated and protested. "You just got there before I could react. Otherwise, I could have handled it myself." Alright, he laughed. "Next time, go all out. I'll back you up." Why did that sound indulgent? I turned back toward the window, feeling my cheeks warm for no reason. Life had been calm and fulfilling lately, until one unexpected thing happened. That jerk Julian actually messaged me, twice in a row. "What have you been up to lately? Come see me. You still have a chance to get that card back." Careless of me, I hadn't blocked his number. Without a second thought, I added it to my blacklist. Realizing I hadn't streamed in a while, I opened my social app and went live. Not long after, that familiar quiet viewer appeared again. The moment he entered, he sent 2 high-value gifts. As the screen filled with effects, I quickly thanked him. "Thank you to MT Guardian for the gifts, really appreciate it." He'd been watching my streams for about half a year. From what he said, he lived overseas. Because of the time difference, I streamed during my daytime, which was his nighttime. He listened to my voice to fall asleep. My streams were mainly about drawing, with commentary. Somehow, to him, I'd become a sleep-aid streamer. He was generous and consistently ranked first on my leaderboard, but rarely spoke. He would quietly enter, stay until the stream ended, and then leave. When he did send messages, it was usually to shut down people accusing me of faking my work. Maybe that was just the style of someone with money. That day, Arthur messaged me, saying the temperature had gone up by 1 degree and asking if I wanted to celebrate with barbecue. I'd lost count of how many strange excuses he'd used lately to ask me out to eat. I smiled and agreed. The all-you-can-eat barbecue place had just opened. The decor was upscale, the prices high, but the variety was good and the service decent. Trying it once felt reasonable. Eating hot barbecue in winter was genuinely comforting. Arthur placed freshly grilled meat into my bowl. I dipped it into sauce and took a bite. Delicious. He grilled while I ate, and soon the plate was empty. I looked up, about to tell him to eat too instead of just feeding me, when I caught sight of a familiar figure behind him. I paused briefly, then continued eating as if nothing was wrong. "Noah," a cold voice sounded above me. "Who gave you the nerve to block me?" I looked up and saw Julian standing behind Arthur, staring straight at me. I didn't respond. His gaze flicked briefly toward Arthur, his tone growing sharper. "Impressive. You move on fast. So who is this now?" Before he could finish, someone interrupted him. "Why is there so much noise here?" Arthur set down his utensils, leaned back slightly, and tilted his head as he looked at Julian with clear disdain. "This is a restaurant," he said calmly. "Mind your manners." "What did you just say?" Julian stopped mid-sentence. The moment his eyes landed on Arthur's face, all the anger drained from him. His expression froze in disbelief. "Adrian, why are you here?" Now I was confused too. "Adrian?" That was Arthur. Was Julian seeing things? Julian's voice completely lost its earlier sharpness. It turned unbelievably gentle. "Adrian, I couldn't reach you before. Did you change your contact information?" Arthur clicked his tongue impatiently, his face filled with clear disdain. "I changed my name years ago," he said coldly. "Stop pretending we're close." That was when my eyes widened. Arthur didn't deny it. He said he'd changed his name, meaning he really was Adrian, Julian's so-called white moonlight. While I was still processing the shock, Julian seemed oblivious to Arthur's rejection. He smiled and said patiently, "I heard about the name change. It's just been a long time since we last met. How about having a meal together sometime?" Arthur replied with brutal efficiency, "We're not close. Leave." Julian tried to speak again, but Arthur directly called over a staff member, saying someone was disturbing other guests. The situation became awkward. Julian's face turned dark, but he still forced himself to hold back. Before leaving, he shot me a vicious glare, his eyes practically burning. Definitely something wrong with him. I watched him leave in a daze, then slowly turned to look at Arthur. Arthur, on the other hand, was completely calm. He placed another piece of grilled meat into my bowl. "Keep eating," he said. Since Arthur clearly didn't want to talk about it, I swallowed my curiosity and continued eating. Only after we got into the car did I hesitate before asking, "Arthur, was your name Adrian before?" "Yes," he nodded. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't think something so minor was worth mentioning. I shook my head to show I didn't mind. "Then, you knew Julian before?" "Julian?" Arthur frowned slightly. "You mean that unhinged guy just now?" He thought for a moment. "I ran into him a few times at gatherings before I went abroad." Then he added calmly, "My only impression is that he loves showing off." The disgust in Arthur's tone was genuine. I almost laughed out loud. If Julian knew that the person he'd been obsessed with despised him this much, he'd probably lose his mind. Then another question occurred to me. "Arthur, do you think Julian and I look alike?" I couldn't help glancing at him again as I asked. Other than both having eyes, a nose, and a mouth, I honestly couldn't see any resemblance. "Ha!" He looked stunned by the question. Then, as if his mind ran off in some strange direction, he stammered, "Well, People say that when two people spend a long time together, they start to look alike. You know, the so-called couple resemblance. He paused, then added almost thoughtfully, but we're probably not there yet. We haven't lived together long enough. That wasn't what I meant at all. And that last sentence somehow carried a hint of regret. After organizing my thoughts, I briefly told him about what had happened between Julian and me, including the whole white moonlight and substitute situation. Since Arthur and I would likely be living together for a long time, I didn't want this to turn into a source of misunderstanding. So, Arthur said, his tone sharp, he's the roommate who kicked you out in the middle of winter. Yeah, that's completely unhinged, Arthur said with visible disgust. Trash like that isn't worth another glance. This was nothing like what I'd imagined. This so-called white moonlight barely knew Julian, and openly disliked him, which meant we were very much on the same side. After a moment of silence, Arthur hesitated before asking, so you, like men? I paused briefly and glanced at him. Yes. Does that bother you? Not at all, he answered immediately. Not even a little. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the corner of his lips lift into a smile. Why did that make him so happy? Life went on as usual. I stayed home drawing and streaming, occasionally going out to eat with Arthur. Thinking back, I was living far more comfortably than I ever had at Julian's place. Until one day, a message from an unknown number briefly ruined my mood. Noah, what exactly are you trying to do? Don't think getting close to Adrian behind my back will change anything. If I find out you're doing anything to hurt him, I won't let it go. It was obviously Julian. I actually laughed. The imagination on this guy was unreal. I replied with a single message. You should really consider seeing a professional. Then I blocked the number without hesitation. As time went on, I realized Arthur was becoming more and more flawless as a roommate. He always thought about me, the stay-at-home type. Even while working, he'd message me to chat. Before getting off work, he'd ask if I needed anything and bring it back for me. Once home, he often headed straight into the kitchen to cook dinner, never repeating the same dishes. Sometimes he took me out to eat instead, and we practically toured all the good restaurants in the city. And I, naturally, grew more and more bold, asking him to bring this or that every day. Of course, I returned the favor. When I went out during the day, I'd occasionally bring him small gifts. Everything was great, except for one tiny issue. He loved showing off his physique in front of me. That day, when I saw him walking around shirtless for the nth time, I finally couldn't take it anymore. Aren't you cold? I asked. No, he replied calmly. The heating's on. That wasn't the point at all. The point was, you can't just walk around like that and expect me to stay calm. Taking a deep breath, I decided to scare him a little. You know, I said, I like men. To my surprise, the smile on his face immediately became impossible to suppress. His eyes lit up with unmistakable delight. So, he asked softly, does that mean I have a chance? My face instantly heated up at his words. I stammered, completely at a loss for what to say. In the end, I threw out a single sentence. You have no sense of propriety, and rushed straight into my room. I was buried under the blanket, trying to calm myself down, when my phone suddenly buzzed. It was a message from Arthur. How am I lacking propriety? I wasn't showing anyone else. The heat on my face only got worse. After that, we both pretended nothing had happened and never brought it up again. One day, Arthur suddenly asked if I'd been free lately. He said he had a project and wanted to collaborate with me. I'm familiar with your skills and your level, he said seriously. You're exactly what I'm looking for. I thought about it. I was about to finish my last commission in the next few days anyway, so my schedule would open up. Sure, I agreed. His eyes lit up. Then, would you consider working at my company? He added. I'll make sure the salary satisfies you. The benefits are great too. I hesitated. That way we'd see each other more. He paused, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, we could work together. Don't worry, the company will prepare a private workspace for you. After that day, Arthur started subtly trying to win me over. A week later, I officially joined Starlight Games. Although my workplace changed, my workload didn't increase. The company atmosphere was great, and my colleagues were friendly. I adapted quickly. After work, I could even ride home in Arthur's car. Life was pretty great. Noah, off work. I looked up and saw Arthur leaning against the doorway, watching me. Under the lights, the gentleness in his eyes was impossible to miss. I froze for a second, then saved my work and shut down my computer. Coming. After packing up, we headed to the parking lot together. It was late. We'd both worked overtime that night. I glanced at Arthur and noticed the exhaustion clearly written on his face. Tired? I asked. Let's order takeout tonight. Go home and rest properly, you've worked hard. You too, Noah, he said softly. It'll get better after this busy period. As he spoke, he lifted his hand and gently rubbed my head. He'd been doing that more and more lately. I pursed my lips but didn't dodge, considering how tired he looked. So he pushed his luck. Then, "Can Noah give me a comforting hug?" I hadn't even responded yet. He had already stepped forward, wrapped his arms around me, and pulled me into his embrace. The cool, familiar scent unique to him surrounded me. Warmth spread through my body. I rested my head dazedly against his chest. My heart was racing. I wasn't sure if it was his, or mine. He held me for a long time. I was the first to come back to my senses. All right, I urged softly. Let's go home. Let's go home. Just as I started to pull away from his arms, I saw Julian standing behind him. Julian saw me too. After freezing for a second, he shouted, "Who are you? Let go of Noah." He strode over in fury, but the moment Arthur turned to face him, Julian stopped abruptly. His expression shifted in an instant. "No, Noah, let go of him." That change of attitude was impressively fast. "Starlight doesn't welcome you," Arthur said coldly. "Leave." He finally released me, but in the very next second, he took my hand instead. Julian was furious, but he clearly didn't dare explode in front of Arthur. Forcing himself to stay calm, he said, "Adrian, nothing ever happened between me and him. I never touched him." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying you didn't completely ruin his life?" Julian pressed on. "You don't need to demean yourself just to get back at me, staying close to someone so calculating." Arthur and I both looked equally confused. Arthur took a deep breath, tightened his grip on my hand, leaned down, and whispered into my ear as if no one else existed. "Doesn't this look exactly like that book we read a few days ago? The one about narcissistic personality disorder?" I nodded seriously. "It really does. Adrian, any misunderstandings between us, I can explain them." Julian continued talking to himself. "Don't listen to Noah. Lately when I come to your company, the security guards keep stopping me." At that, he shot me a vicious glare, as if I personally ran security. Arthur cut him off. "I told you, I don't go by Adrian anymore. Understand? Not letting you into the company was my decision. Starlight isn't a place where just anyone can wander in. And one more thing." Arthur's gaze turned sharp. "I'm pursuing someone. Can't you see that? Try stirring trouble again and see what happens." "What? You're chasing someone? That's impossible. Stop joking." Julian's expression snapped, turning almost feral. I was stunned too. Arthur said he was chasing someone. Who? Me? I looked up at Arthur, eyes wide, and saw him staring at Julian with an icy seriousness. "Julian, right? Listen carefully. From now on, we're enemies. Not just rivals, enemies until the end. You hurt Noah. I'm going to make you pay for that. 1,000 times over." He ignored Julian's furious rant and shoved me into the passenger seat before starting the car and driving home. After a while, I finally came back to myself and kept stealing glances at him. Arthur's face stayed calm, eyes fixed on the road. But if you looked closely, there was a hint of something else. Nervousness, maybe? I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Are you chasing me?" He nodded. "Yeah, but you never said anything." He frowned. "Wasn't it obvious? They say if you want to chase someone, actions matter more than words. You have to prove it with what you do." Arthur had been incredibly good to me lately, almost too good. Sometimes I wondered if he liked me, but I was also afraid I was reading too much into it. Maybe he was just being a good roommate, or maybe he was being nice because he was a fan of mine. If this hadn't happened today, how long would he have kept acting like this before saying something? I couldn't believe it. Can't actions and words happen at the same time? "Right," Arthur said, thinking for 2 seconds. "I was wrong, baby." That day, when we officially became a couple, Arthur couldn't hide how happy he was. He took me out to eat and drink like we were celebrating something huge. And that night, he brought me to the master bedroom and made it clear I was sleeping with him. He said, "I'm a man with a boyfriend now. Of course my boyfriend sleeps in my arms. How could I possibly fall asleep otherwise? Noah, baby, how could you let your boyfriend sleep alone?" I didn't expect Arthur to be like that. I had no choice. I said yes. Arthur's feelings were obvious. I could feel his love in every small gesture. Like now, he pulled me close and kissed me softly. His kisses started at my forehead, slid down over my eyes, brushed my nose, and then landed on my lips. I closed my eyes and parted my mouth slightly, letting our lips meet. Heat spread through my body. We kissed for a long time before he finally let go. We stayed wrapped in each other's arms, breathing heavily. Then I suddenly asked, "Why do you like me?" Arthur looked at me, his eyes reflecting my face. "Maybe because I fall asleep listening to your voice every night. Maybe because of that moment in the snow. Or maybe because of every day we spend together." My eyes widened. Are you, the MT guardian? Yeah, he chuckled softly, pulling me closer. Now I can protect you openly. Every day with Arthur felt like happiness. Real love could really be this sweet. Looking back now, did I really like Julian? Maybe not. I was just fooled by the kindness he pretended to show. I was alone in this city, feeling unstable, and I just wanted someone to rely on. Julian was right. We didn't really do anything. The closest we got was holding hands. Even hugs were rare. At the time, I thought it was too soon. I didn't want to be that close. Now I realize, I didn't truly like him, not even deep down. After I started dating Arthur, in a short time we did almost everything we could do, except the final step. He was clingy, always close, always giving me little kisses. It made me nervous all the time, worried our office romance would be exposed. The next time I heard about Julian, his company was in big trouble. If he didn't handle it right, he might go bankrupt. I knew Arthur had something to do with it, but it didn't matter to me anymore. Julian was irrelevant. Lately, Arthur had been acting mysterious, like he was preparing something. When I found something in the nightstand drawer, I finally understood. That little jerk had been thinking about me, in a way I wasn't ready for. I didn't say anything. I just watched quietly to see what he would do. That night, after a shower, we lay in bed like usual. Noah, he said, wrapping his arms around my waist, voice sticky soft. I'm ready. Okay, I replied. He said it again. I'm ready. I answered. He said it again, patiently. I'm ready. I found it kind of funny. Alright, you're like SpongeBob. He got a little serious. I'm ready. I couldn't help it. I laughed and flipped over, straddling him. I leaned in and winked. I'm ready too. Then everything spun. We switched positions, and I was suddenly pinned under him. His kisses came fast and urgent. I don't know how long it lasted, but in a blur, I felt myself being pulled into a warm embrace again. Someone murmured in my ear, "Ugh, I'm such an idiot." I wanted to kick him, but I couldn't move. I just fell asleep. Fine. I'll deal with you later when I wake up. What we just heard isn't just a love story. It's a story about illusion, betrayal, and finally, freedom. Noah spent an entire year believing he was loved. He believed the warmth, the attention, the routine. He believed it was real. But the moment Julian's true love returned, everything Noah had built in that year was revealed as nothing more than a temporary placeholder, a substitute, a stand-in. And the cruelty wasn't only in Julian's words, it was in the way he made Noah feel replaceable. The most painful part isn't the breakup, it's the realization. Noah didn't lose Julian. He lost a fantasy, a carefully crafted illusion that never belonged to him. Then, when the story could have become a tragedy, something unexpected happens. Noah meets Arthur. Not just a stranger, but a person who sees him, respects him, and chooses him. And that shift is the heart of the whole narrative. The contrast between Julian and Arthur is brutal and clear. Julian represents possession, manipulation, and selfish desire. Arthur represents care, stability, and genuine love. Noah's journey isn't about finding someone better. It's about learning to deserve better. And here's the twist. Arthur wasn't just kind. He was the one who had been protecting Noah the whole time. He wasn't a coincidence. He was the answer. So the question I want to leave you with is, which kind of love do you think is more powerful? The one that uses you, or the one that chooses you?